Hello and welcome to the Connected Leadership Podcast. I'm Andy Lapata. Thank you very much for joining me. If you haven't joined us before, just to give you an idea of what's going on and what you can expect from this broadcast. This is where I interview my guests for my Connected Leadership podcast, but stream them live on LinkedIn, Facebook and YouTube. And you are joining me, hopefully live. Just to give you a time check, it's 10 past 12 UK time on Friday the 26th of November. So if you're watching at any other time, you're still welcome to join us. You're still welcome to comment, but you're not live. If you're joining us now, you're live, and please type in the comments who you are, where you're based, and as we go through, if you've got any questions, any comments, I'll try to feed those into the conversation as much as I can. So we record 2 interviews today. One goes out on Monday next week, and that will be a 45-minute, roughly, conversation based out around our theme for today, which is based around thought and thoughtful leadership. And then when we've done that, I'll be saying goodbye to our guests and goodbye to you, but none of you need to leave, because we'll carry on and we'll conduct Thursday's interview, which will be our typical 15 to 20 minutes where we look at the impact of professional relationships on our guests' careers. This will be the last Connected Leadership podcast for 2021. It will not be the last live broadcast, because we're going to carry on interviews throughout December and January for when we come back, which will probably be at the beginning of February next year. But we want to build up a little bit of a library, because I'm chasing my tail a little bit, hence recording on Friday and publishing on Monday. Not ideal, but that's where we are at the moment. So let me introduce my guests, tell you who we have with us. If you introduce yourselves as well, I can see that there are a few people watching on the various platforms, and you're welcome to type in the comments, tell me who you are. But let me introduce my guests for today. They're both people that I have known for a very long time, actually. In both cases, we met through an online, a very early online network called Academy. And got to know each other through that community, and we've stayed in touch ever since. In one case, I'm emceeing a conference for one of my guests next week, and in fact her publishing company has published my last 2 books and 3 of my books in total. And in the other case, we enjoyed a trip to England versus Australia at Twickenham just a week and a half, or just about 2 weeks ago. I will be nice, Mr. Daniel Priestley, and I won't mention the final score, how appalling Australia were at rugby. And we won't mention the Cricket World Cup either. So welcome, Daniel Priestley and Mindy Gibbins-Klein. I think I nearly merged your names there, so you became Dandy, which just about works as well. Daniel and Mindy, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Daniel, we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago at the rugby. I remember when I first met you at Adam Street Club, and you had just come over from Australia. You were so young and youthful looking, as you are still, but even more so. And at the time, you'd seen me interviewed in the Financial Times, you'd seen my books published, and you were like, oh wow, this is just amazing. And you've gone on to achieve so much, and you've had great success with your books yourself. You now own your own publishing house. You've gone from strength to strength. I've been really impressed with that. So congratulations. It's great to get you on the podcast.
Yeah, that was such a great hub of entrepreneurial activity, that Adam Street Club. I think probably Mindy and I met there for the first time as well, in 2006, 2007, something like that. It was just, it's every so often there's one of those amazing little places where everyone seems to congregate, and it's lasted the test of time.
It has. The club's no longer there, but the community still is. I was never a member, but I was along there quite a bit from my own base at the Hospital Club. Mindy, before I come to you, I have to say a big welcome to a first-time viewer on the podcast that we all know, and I'm absolutely delighted to see him there, Brian Chernett. And Brian, who I haven't seen for a while, it's great to see you there. And he's just said, hello, Mindy, who published his book. Brian was the founder, for those who don't know, of the Academy for Chief Executives. a great guy, a real inspiration, someone who's dedicated his life, I think, really to helping others, supporting other people. And on our topic today of thought leadership and thoughtful leadership, particularly, and Mindy, I'm going to ask you about this first when we get into the podcast, that term thoughtful leadership, I think Brian would be a role model for that. So Brian, it's absolutely great to have you here. And it's great to have you, Mindy. So I am going to ask you for the podcast about Tuesday's event for the benefit of people who are tuning in now. Can you just give us a quick 30 seconds on it so they can go and have a look while not navigating away from this, but while they're watching and listening, they can go and have a look at what we're doing on Tuesday as well.
Yeah, it's a fantastic event. Thanks for asking, Andy. And it's called the Above and Beyond Thoughtful Leadership Conference. It's the third time we've run it. The first year was in person. Last year, virtual, as
Yeah.
everyone had. And this year we decided to go virtual again with all the uncertainty. And I'm glad that we're doing that. It is about Thought Leadership 2.0, which I'll talk about during this interview. It's about going above and beyond with your thought leadership. And yes, it's based on a term that I use a lot, thoughtful leadership. So if somebody aspires to be a truly thoughtful leader or a thought leader, it's a great conference. You can check it out on hopin.com. Or just Google Above and Beyond Thoughtful Leadership Conference. Thank you.
Absolutely, and it's got a world-class MC as well. We should just throw that in. Rob Moores is watching on LinkedIn. Says, "Hey guys, great topic for a Friday." So Rob, thanks for joining us. So we're going to get into our topic today. So my theme, when I was putting this together, I've wanted you guys on this podcast from day one. It's taken us a while to get diaries to work, but we got there. When I was putting this all together, I thought, well, what's the right theme considering what the premise of the podcast is, which is the impact of professional relationships for leadership success, and the topic for today, which is thought leadership. And I thought we could look at the relationship between thought leadership and connected leadership. How do the two fit in? That the connected leadership being the power of relationships to build leadership success, and that seemed to be a fit. So regular listeners to the podcast will have an idea, I would hope, of what connected leadership is, as it's the title of the podcast. But let's start with thought leadership. And I know, Mindy, you've got your own extension of this, which I've just referenced, which is thoughtful leadership. So can you, Mindy, give us your definition of thought leadership and thoughtful leadership?
Okay, great. Thank you. So I started noticing in 2007 that the term was becoming used, but very sort of randomly. And I wrote a book called 24 Karat Bold, and I started speaking on this topic. I spoke for several of Brian's groups, if he's still watching. And I felt very strongly that you can't just use terms. I work with words. I've been a publisher and a book coach for nearly 20 years now. You can't just throw terms around. So I thought, where are the criteria? I couldn't find any. And so I created my own in the book. And 24 Karat Bold stated that thought leadership is having the courage to share exciting new original ideas widely. And, well, according to academia, being recognized by your peers and mentors. And I began to think, well, actually, it's the market who needs to recognize you. And so that became the foundation for my work in that area. And I think it gives a lot of people confidence when they have a definition. So I'm sure Dan agrees. And, this is something that people need. They can't just go about, trying things and, scattergun approach. It's nice to have some kind of outline and metrics.
I like the fact that you've got the two elements there, and I want to explore each of those. I'm going to come to Dan on the second element, which is the being recognised, and Mindy, you differentiated between your peers and by the market, and I think that a lot of that might depend on what you're trying to achieve as well. Let's stick with you for the moment, Mindy, and look at that courage to share. And the way you term that, the courage to share exciting new ideas, I think that takes a lot of the ego out of thought leadership in a sense, because I think that there might be people who look at the term thought leadership and say, well, that's not me, I'm not a thought leader, who do I think I am, or who do you think you are? But the courage to share exciting new ideas, I think, opens that up. Can you explain a little bit more about how you came up with that exciting new idea?
Well, that's not exactly how it was phrased when I began to
Yeah.
research it back in '07. But I often say exciting, new, original, groundbreaking. It's not necessary to be all of the above.
Yeah.
But I think, especially in this day and age, with all the noise that's out there, to make any kind of impact, you do need to be saying something a bit different, a bit exciting. So they're all subjective terms, aren't they? And the thing that interests me is the fact that every single one of us, every single one, those of us who are on camera, those watching and listening, have these kinds of ideas. The really risky, exciting ones, the ones where we go, could I really say that? That's where I like to play, because it's too noisy and crowded out there. It's too easy to get lost in the noise, and it's getting worse. With everybody being online the past few years, I've had to switch off loads of channels. Not this podcast channel though, and I've had even more confidence around this idea that it's worth putting that extra effort in to craft that idea and package it up in a way that it will land and create the result you want. Otherwise, it's a waste of time and effort.
I think you make a very good point about the noise, because social media has achieved both positive and negative. The positive is it gives everyone a platform. We hear a lot about the democratization of ideas. The negative aspect is the noise that creates and the ability to cut through that. Before I move on to Dan, welcome to Kinga and also to Barbara, who have also tuned in. Kinga on LinkedIn, Barbara on Facebook. Rob Moores has just said on LinkedIn, for me, thought leadership is where mindset change begins. If we don't allow people the space, time and license to think differently and creatively, with the permission to experiment and push boundaries, how can we expect the work and behaviour, I think that would be, to change? So Dan, I'm going to come to you, and you maybe want to pick up on what Rob said there. But you developed a program known as KPI, or Key Person of Influence, which revolves around thought leadership to a huge degree. That's how you position yourself as a leader, as a key person of influence. What's the relationship that you see between leadership and influence, and how can establishing that status affect a leader's position within their organisation and beyond? And I think that goes to what Mindy said about being recognised. And is it by your peers? Is it by the marketplace? Why is a leader using this?
Yeah, so we talked about the noise in the marketplace. In the last 10 years, something like 2 billion people have had access to very fast internet for the first time, and an additional 2 billion people. So that's 2 billion people around the world who have a voice, which is a great thing, but it also creates a very noisy environment. Most of us grew up in a time where we were very influenced by geography. Essentially, we worked at places that were geographically close.
Yeah.
We were friends with people who were geographically close. We went to school geographically. We educated ourselves in a geographically close environment. So geography played this kind of background limitation factor for most of what we heard or consumed. When you take away the barrier of geography, we essentially work in places that are ideologically close, and we befriend people who have the same values, thoughts, and beliefs that we align to. So we align across, not geography, but we align across ideas now. And if you're not sharing ideas, you're not able to create an alignment. You're not able to recruit talented people who want to align to a vision. You're not able to get investors behind something that they agree with your ideas. You're not able to find a group of loyal, fanatical customers who want to go on a journey with you. So if you're not sharing those ideas, you're not laying down the foundations for people to get behind what you do. And it's effectively the default is to just get drowned out in the noise. So essentially, you're left with the scraps after that if you're not putting yourself out there.
This idea of geographical isolation versus geographical engagement versus ideological engagement. This came up recently, and I'm not sure if it was a conversation we had when we were out together a couple of weeks ago, or whether it's come up elsewhere. But this very much has led to the thought bubbles that we see so much blighting society to a large degree, because people are engaging more and more with people who think the same way as them, using social networks to do it, and not talking to their neighbours in the same way, who may bring different ideas into their space. And that, one of the things that I do talk about a lot, and my guests raise as well on this podcast, is the importance of cognitive diversity. Having different inputs to help you think better. So this, moving from a geographical neighbourhood to an ideological neighbourhood, is that blunting our ability to come up with cutting edge new ideas. I'll throw that back to you, Dan.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex problem. Essentially, we, you and I went to the rugby and we watched two teams from different geographies fight it out. And we sat on the sidelines watching essentially people who had a geographical marker, Australia versus England. And what we're now doing is we're sitting on the sidelines of these online debates where ideologies slug it out and try and score points against each other. And we're almost forced to choose certain ideologies because our ideological neighborhood says that's the right answer. We've all had the experience, I think, of taking a position and then learning a little bit more over time, and then almost taking a different position and changing our mind on a topic over time. People may have started out, quite conservative on one idea, and then open themselves up to it and become a bit more open or liberal on an idea. And the opposite can happen. Sometimes people start very open on an idea and they then close in on a particular way of thinking over time. So the issue is that the internet is made up of ones and zeros. It's very polarizing and binary, and it drives wedges into people. There's these bubbles that we end up in. And we do have to consciously and make a decision to be open to new ideas, to defend people's right to share something, and to say, I don't agree with you, but I really agree that we're having the conversation. I agree that you're putting your ideas out there for scrutiny and that we can discuss things. And also, it's great to go looking for people who are sharing similar ideas, but geographically very, very differently. So you can see how those ideas come out to play in a different part of the world. The rules aren't really set in the times that we're living in. It's such a, we're all getting used to this idea of this kind of internet digital landscape that we find ourselves in, that has much more influence on us than the geographical landscape.
Well, it's interesting. When I set out to write a book on vulnerability, one of the key things I did was talk to people all over the world, and I made sure that I interviewed people from all different cultures to understand, would what I say, from a lived experience in the UK, albeit I've travelled a lot, still resonate in Asia, in Russia, in India, in America, and so forth. So I think it is really important to understand how these things land. Mindy, I want to pick up on something Dan said there. There's something I still want to come back to, but I just want to carry on this conversation for a bit. I want to pick up on something Dan said there, and that was this point about the ability to change our minds. Now, if you take a thought leadership position and you stand out and say, I believe that we're doing this wrong, for example, and I think this is the right way of doing things, and then people engage you in debate and discussion about that, and they convince you otherwise, how does a thought leader change tack if they need to?
Great question. And before I answer that, I just would like to acknowledge the fact that in 24 Karat Bold, I said, you want to be bold and opinionated, yet respectful. And I think it's that last element which has been forgotten by some people. Some, I'll be diplomatic.
A lot of,
what I was aiming to do way back then, 14, 15 years ago, was to get certain people to speak up. because, there are a lot of people on the sidelines, which is great if you're at a rugby match, but not so great if you're trying to get your voice heard and your ideas followed. So the interesting thing was, it swung the other way. The pendulum has created this boldness, but possibly not with all the respect that it deserves. So to answer that question, the echo chamber, or thought bubble, as you call it, can be a great place to reinforce your ideas, to find these like-minded people, to, share in a safe space where you know that you're not going to be attacked. And in fact, I actually think it is worth seeking that out. And it's called finding your tribe. As long as it's done in a way that acknowledges you don't have all the answers, and the ideas you have today may morph into something else. They will evolve. That's how things happen. But not to forget about the fact that you do want to have that safe space. And let's face it, we like spending time with and building professional relationships with people who we see eye to eye with. I don't like conflict. I don't know how many of our listeners like conflict. I don't like debate. And when I put an idea out there, even what I'm saying right now, I'm not saying I'm right and you're wrong. And this is what thoughtful leadership is, and I know we'll get to that. It's about putting that extra thought and attention and care into how you say things and doing it respectfully.
Well, on that, Rob Moores has said on LinkedIn, respectful. You're absolutely spot on, Mindy. So you have no conflict there. He said, well said. But what about? I just want to push back a little bit, or go back to a little bit this idea of you've actually taken a stand on something. You've said, actually, I think this is the way forward, and I want to take the lead on this. And then people push back, and they have a strong case. I think a thought leader, a strong leader of any kind, and this comes to how I see connected and vulnerable leadership, should be able to say, I got it wrong. And there's a chapter in Just Ask, do we allow our politicians to get things wrong? Because I think that there's a cultural issue there. How would you handle that? How would you handle a U-turn as a thought leader?
Are you still asking me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I talk about this in the Thoughtful Leader book and podcast as well. It is about making sure that you take ownership for your own ideas, how you put them across. It's about reflecting and then showing your audience, your market, the other person, how you've reflected. And it's about taking care, as I say, about how you say things. I have said many times I got it wrong. My TED Talk, which has nearly 1 million views, is all about how I got something wrong. It's had a lot of great responses. I've had a few critics. But, I stand by what I said, how I said it, how I put that talk together, how I couldn't eat or sleep for 3 weeks leading up to it, because it was that important to me.
Yeah.
I really aim never to be disrespectful online, offline, in relationships. That's paramount for me. That is one of my top values. And when I get it wrong, I do say. Daniel and I have had some conversations in the past, and probably you and I, Andy, as well, where I've said, hey, mea culpa, let's fix this, because that's just my MO.
I have to say, I saw your TED Talk a few years ago, and I had already known you for a long time, and it shifted my perception of you to the better, and it was already good. But it's a very powerful TED Talk, and I recommend people check it out. I know Kinga, I don't know if Kinga has access to the link and can put it into the comments on LinkedIn. Rob has said, Celeste Headley says it perfectly in her TED Talk. Sometimes I've spoken to people that I disagree with deeply on a personal level, but that doesn't mean we can't still have a great conversation. Respect. And just to add to that, if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook, have a look at the quote I put up today from the podcast last week, or this week's podcast, last week's interview with Linda Shaw, Dr. Linda Shaw, where she said, you may not like someone, but you can still respect them as a human being. And I added in a quote that I heard recently from Tupac, which was, I may not be your friend anymore, but that doesn't make me your enemy. I still want you to eat, just not at my table, which I really like that one. So all of these things, it's just about mutual respect, and I think that understanding that gives us the freedom to speak more openly. Kinga has added to what Mindy has said. A thoughtful leader for me is someone who is able to take all perspectives into view and take a listener through that thought process. That's how respect comes through for me. So some really good inputs there. Dan, I want to come down from the theoretical plane a little bit here, because I think this is really interesting stuff, but I want people to have some really practical takeaways they can use from this podcast, as well as thought-provoking content. I think we're in the thought-provoking content phase at the moment. My listeners generally, and it will be a mix, my listeners generally will be aspiring leaders, or they will be leaders in larger organisations, and as a result, they are almost all time poor. They have a lot going on. So a couple of questions around this. Are they doing this for themselves, or are they doing it in their role in the business? And I guess this goes to Mindy's comment earlier that I wanted to come back to about, are you being recognised by your peers or the marketplace? And how important is this when you've got a business to run day to day? Why would you prioritise this?
So I want to be a bit provocative and say that none of us are time poor or time rich. Time is the great leveler. We all have 24 hours a day. We all get the exact same amount of time. We're not equal on very many things, but we're certainly equal on the amount of time that we have. The issue is about how do we maximize the value of our time, and how do we make sure that we're moving towards the highest value and the highest expression of time, getting the most done in as quick as possible, being highly effective leaders. So, when you have the opportunity to spend 1 hour producing a digital asset that will be consumed by 1,000 people, that's a huge amount of leverage. And that leverage is a great use of time. If I can sit down and talk to someone one-to-one, or I can create a podcast, or I can create an article, there's going to be more value and more leverage in doing something that can be consumed by more people, will have a wider impact. If I want to hire talented people, if I want to access great customers, the research points towards, in particular, Professor Robin Dunbar talks about how we come to get to know, like, and trust people. Google does research on how we buy things and how we actually come to feel safe to buy. And all of it involves a learning process. All of it involves getting to know something, and spending time with something. So the fastest and most effective way to do that is through digital asset creation, putting your ideas out there, putting stuff online, being out there. So if we look at the greatest leaders in entrepreneurship and business, people like Tim Cook leading Apple, people like Elon Musk and Tesla. We're looking at people who put their ideas right out there. They put them straight out into the marketplace without any hesitation. And if they've got the opportunity to put those ideas in front of an audience, they go for it. So that's because they understand the value of leverage and the value of that time. So I'm a father of 3 young kids. I've got 7 companies in the group at the moment. Got a team of close to 100 people across the group. My highest priority is doing things like this, where we have conversations and we get ideas in the market.
Just a quick question to pick up on your role models there. Elon Musk has done some brilliant stuff through social. He's also perhaps taken a few steps that are not to be recommended in terms of things he's tweeted, and now I believe his tweets have to be approved by Tesla board or someone before they go out because of their impact on the share price. Can we just look at that risk element of it when you're putting out ideas out there into a public sphere, particularly if you're not the CEO of, but you're a leader in a well-known brand? How do you get that balance right, Dan?
Well, it's best to not call someone you've never met a pedophile. That's probably
that was in my mind, that particular
I don't
tweet.
think he was showering himself in glory on that particular occasion. I think most people have more of a filter than Elon. Elon has confessed that he's not great at filtering his ideas. I think it's important when you're building confidence as a thought leader that you stay in your lane, right? Stick to something you know, stick to something that you're confident in. Um, One of the greatest ways you can reduce stress in your life is to narrow the topics that you have a strong opinion on, right? So pick some topics that you do have an opinion about. It might be very narrow topics. It might be how to hire talented people in manufacturing, right? It could be, that little narrow thing could be your thing and you can talk confidently about that and you know a lot about that. Don't get lured into all the topical debates. Stay away from the hot topics, stay away from Brexit, stay away from the pandemic, stay away from politics, stay away from all the woke stuff that gets you in hot water, right? And stick to the thing that you're very confident about and that you know that you can add value to the conversation, and ignore the rest. And that's a great way to build confidence. When you become a global icon like Elon, you're constantly going to be dragged into topics that are not your wheelhouse. And if you're the richest person on the planet, you're going to feel the confidence, the background confidence, to just comment on every damn thing that comes along. So most of us aren't dealing with the background confidence of being worth 300 billion.
Yeah.
So we can just stick to our lane.
So Mindy, people starting out decided, I want to do this, whether it's for recognition within my organisation, whether it's for recognition within my marketplace, whatever it might be. How do they get started? I want to be a thoughtful leader. How do they get started doing that?
Okay, great question. And I must acknowledge what Daniel said. Absolutely right about getting that scope right. Not trying to boil the ocean, as they say. It's impossible, right? Just imagine. And having that niche or niche, you have a chance. When you go too broad, forget it. You're not going to be seen and you're not going to have impact. So that's absolutely correct. I will pick up on the word woke because hashtag woke and proud. I think, we could talk for an hour on that, but we won't. Having created the liberal entrepreneur, I've got a very serious mission, and part of that involves not using words like woke, but we'll take that offline. So the
should have stayed clear of that one, Dan.
I'll just avoid that topic.
We use words intentionally or unintentionally. Yeah. That's what we do as human beings. So to answer your question now, where to get started? If I were giving someone advice, and I do give a lot of advice to entrepreneurs, corporate students, don't start with the thought, I want to be a thought leader. That's the wrong place to start. So thought leadership is the effect. Thought leadership is the result or the windfall of doing all the things right. To think about what's important to you. What, one of us has said, what change do we want to see in society? Where do we see an opportunity to create impact about something that matters, to leave a legacy? These are all things that come up when I do surveys on LinkedIn. Every time the word legacy comes up, more than profit or building a business, and certainly not, I want to be a thought leader. It's a bit, over here in the UK, we say it's a bit naff to say that. So right? That's not the goal. It will happen. You will be recognized. But the key areas are, first of all, what is that passion project? What is that idea that you feel bubbling away inside? Yes, you might be scared. Yes, you might not have the courage, like I said before, but it is important to you, and you can see, you might not know how, but you can see it getting out there and touching people's lives and changing people's lives. That's where you start. And then to build that out, to decide what reach do you want, what engagement do you need, and really being willing to work through that thoughtfully. Speaking about the time that we all have, I'm a big believer in less is more, except where more is more. But and Rob Moore is definitely more. But
Rob Moore has posted more.
But the key thing is not to just scattergun, as I said before, to be intentional, to be precise, to take the time and effort. That's showing respect to your market. So even if I don't mean to say even, if you're in a corporate role and you're not running your own business, you are running your own business. You are a little piece of the business. And therefore, putting that thought in, doing less, but what you want to be doing is taking that time out to reflect. What is the difference you want to make? And just work it and rework it and get feedback on that, but without showing your cards maybe until you've worked through it a bit. And then there's help. If you're an entrepreneur, you'll know that getting help in the form of delegation, outsourcing, masterminds, there's so many different ways in which you can get help and you don't have to do it all yourself. But I believe each of us needs to do the thinking for ourselves. We cannot outsource our thinking.
I completely agree with that. There's a lot I want to pick up on there, but I'm going to hone in on one thing in particular. And Rob Moores has posted another comment that links in with that. Before I read that, John J.J. Boys is watching on LinkedIn, says great conversation. So thanks for joining us, John. Rob says the thing about great leadership and therefore great thought leadership is that it's a personal manifestation. You're only a great leader if people who follow you feel that you are. And equally, there will still be many who feel that you're not great. And I think that your answer, Mindy, what ran through it for me was this needs to be your voice. It needs to be authentic, and authenticity is a word that comes up time and time and time again. And there's a good reason for that, because I think we engage with authenticity. We engage when people really feel something. So I like the fact that your answer wasn't, well, step one is do this, step two is do this. Your answer was, what do you want your voice to be in the world? What do you want your change that you can make to be? So Dan, how can people find the courage to find their voice? And how do they find the right level of authenticity when they're getting that voice out there?
So I think courage comes with familiarity, that you do something over and over again, and you build the courage to do it. If you're riding a motorcycle for the first time, it's a biological response to not feel very confident, because if you felt really confident doing things that you had never done before, you'd probably wind up as a pancake. So the idea is that we build familiarity in safer environments, and then we move to a slightly more vulnerable environment. So we might road test some ideas with some safe contacts. I have a terminology in my company which is called locking horns. Locking horns, we ask each other, can we have permission to lock horns on that idea? So we actually just say, let's lock horns. Now, reindeer lock horns in order to strengthen each other. They're on the same team, and they're taking opposing positions in order to get a stronger, get to gain strength. So one of the things I often do with my friends, my colleagues, is I say, let me lock horns with you on that idea, or I've got an idea, I want you to lock horns with me on it, which is I want you to argue the toss with me. And it helps me to build confidence around my ideas in a safe environment before I take them slightly out there. And as far as authenticity, it's something I really struggle with in terms of, I get the idea of authenticity, and I think it's great on paper. The reality of being a leader is that on most days, if someone said, authentically, how do you feel? You might say, I feel like I don't want to be doing this right now. I've got other things I'd like to be doing. I'm a bit exhausted by the number of things you've screwed up in the last month. And I feel like I've explained this 28 times. And actually, I've made enough money that I'd rather just be traveling this week and not bothering with, there's all sorts of things that might authentically pop into your head. And in many cases, you need to stick to the script. I personally, as a speaker, the amount of times that I've delivered the 5 Ps, and I've talked about, the 5 Ps in the book, Key Person of Influence. And, authentically, there are days where I'm sick of talking about the 5 Ps. I want to make up the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th P, right? And sort of talk about some new stuff. But I know that what the audience wants to hear is that particular topic. So part of being authentic is actually rising to the moment, delivering what people need to hear. When I'm talking to my team and when I'm talking to my an audience, I'm really tuning into what do they need to hear from me? What is the most important message I need to get across? And to me, that's more important to to the bigger picture, authenticity is like my long-term vision. I've got to be authentic to what I want to see happen over the next 10 years, not authentic to, which is inauthentic to what I might want to do today. So it's a tricky topic. It's a really tricky one.
You can still be authentic about what you're talking about. So when you do talk about the 5 Ps, you still believe in them. And that's the authenticity. And if you didn't, then that's when you should stop talking about them. And that goes back to the U-turn question earlier on. Mindy, what's your take on this? How important is authenticity to you? And where's the line for you in the same way that Dan expressed it?
So rising to the moment, that's my favorite phrase that he just used, because it's in every moment. Authenticity is in every single moment, especially now that there's so much video. We never before had so many eyes on us as we do now. And that can scare a lot of people. The potential is huge. And people can see through BS immediately. I'm sure everybody listening and watching, is nodding furiously. I won't, for the camera's sake. But I really believe that you cannot be inauthentic and thrive. So one of the things, of course, a lot of my business is about helping people plan their writing strategy and their thought leadership strategy. In writing, you have a lot more time. You can craft a message, you can edit it, you can look at it, you can get feedback. But when you're doing a video or a live speech, you've got to be in the moment and you've got to rise to the moment. So thanks for adding that phrase to my life, Dan. That's my take on it. I think the reason why I get the feedback I do in my business, online, after speeches, after videos and podcasts especially, is people get that. And I don't know when I dropped it. I'm a little bit older than both of you guys. You get to that point and you just think, I have to be myself, and it's just so much easier.
I think this rise to the moment and the way you've described it there, Mindy, links in with Nigel Risner's "Be in the Room," and it's very much about being in the moment and not worrying about all those other things that are going on that Dan referenced in his response. So you've talked there about responses to your speeches and your podcasts and so forth. You're both publishers. Dan, you talked about social media. So there, just in that short summary, we've got a range of different channels you can use to get your voice out there and be a thought leader. So can each of you just touch on that for a moment? How important are all these formal channels? Is it just get started on social media? Is it just talk to your colleagues and peers and start to get people engaged with your ideas? Can we make this as simple as possible for people to engage with? Mindy, I'll come to you first on that, and then Dan, I'd appreciate your input as well.
So several things. If you have multiple channels, you're improving and increasing the chance that people can engage, because if you only write and people don't read, you're not reaching them. If you only do videos and somebody's not online or they don't like watching videos, you get the idea. So to think about where you want to play, who you want to engage with, and like we've discussed, this is a global opportunity now. So but where do you want to play? And this is the area where I end up coaching clients quite a lot. They say, oh, well, there's a big market. I say, stop right there. Where do you want to play? Because it's pointless going and going after a big market if it's not your flame, if that's not really what you want to be doing. There are enough people out there in the world who will be receptive to you and your message. And like I said before, the like-minded people just can be a nicer experience for you. So my advice to people is just slow down, stop and think. Be wary of influential people, even the three of us. Don't just take what we're saying today and say, oh, I've got to do that because Mindy said that or Daniel said that. Just reflect and decide what is right for you. What is your personal, thoughtful leadership strategy? Because each of us can own that. That's my most important message right now. Yes, there's a lot of channels, but that's secondary. The first thing is, where do you want to play? And believe it or not, we can all choose.
One of the things that I often say to my clients and groups that I speak to and work with is, when people say, oh, I don't like Twitter, I don't like Instagram, I don't like LinkedIn, I say it doesn't matter what you like. If you know who you want to play with, you go and play where they're playing. So if your audience is on Instagram or TikTok, I'm not on TikTok. I don't think my audience generally is. I'm not saying exclusively. But if they were, guess what? I would just have to learn it and get to use it. So Dan, I know the KPI program that you run. You talk about all these different channels. You have experts who talk about book publishing. You have experts who talk about social media and so forth. So how important is it to master each of those areas? Should everyone write a book? Everyone says they've got a book in them. Should everyone write it?
Yeah, so I think everyone should certainly be writing long articles and blogs. And there's something that happens when you write where you organize your thinking. You really have to start to order the way that you think and organize the way that you think into a structured way that really does actually make you smarter on your topic. When you write about a topic, you get smarter about the topic. You have to go and research it. You have to go and find examples that back up what you're thinking. You're having to put a flag in the ground. Maybe not everyone's ready to write a book, but everyone can do a 500 to 1,000 word article that puts some ideas into an organized, thoughtful way. I think a couple of things are a good place to start. Number one, you want to really understand what are the ideas that you want to enroll people in. Is there a new way of thinking or a new behavior that you want to enroll people in? And what is that? Like, what are you trying to enroll people into? You don't just want to confirm what everyone already knows. You want to enroll people into something. So you got to be clear, what is it you're trying to enroll people into? You may want to think about the commercials. What am I trying to sell? Right? Am I trying to sell a product? Am I trying to sell a service? Am I trying to sell a particular solution to a particular buyer? What are the gaps in the person's thinking that I need to close in order for them to buy? So many of us have commercial imperative. We've got to make sales. We've got to have a business that's working. So what ideas or what content would be a very solid bridge for people to cross that would lead towards commercial success? So that's a good place to start as well. And then thinking about, okay, if I've got to put some ideas out there and those ideas are going to enroll people into a new way of thinking and behaving, and it's going to lead to a commercial outcome, and I'm going to make it fun and entertaining and engaging as well. So that's where we then try and, perform the dance, perform the art form of creating some content that would actually do all of that would enroll people in new ways of thinking and get them to want to buy something.
Great stuff. I've got a couple of questions left, but before I ask those, John Boys has asked, how do you prevent data input overload? There are so many ways that people can communicate with you. I find it challenging. Mindy?
Well, in The Thoughtful Leader, I talk about getting into your bubble, and I talk about the power of the UN, as in unfollow, unsubscribe, unfriend if necessary, and unplug if absolutely necessary. So we don't have to be watching and listening, getting ourselves stressed and overwhelmed. A lot of people have forgotten that there's an off switch. So all joking aside, I really think it's a question of discipline. And some of us have had more experience or more training in that, and some have not. So, but there is really no shortcut. And for people who are getting stressed out and feeling overwhelmed, that's probably the most important place to start, because you cannot do any creative thinking. You cannot be thoughtful and come up with new and exciting, original, groundbreaking ideas. There they are. If you're in that mind swirl, it's just not going to happen. And I think people know that. You must do whatever it takes to, get out in nature, unplug. Yes, you have work to do, paperwork, but if you really want to put your best work out there, you've got to become more zen, get yourself, clear the mind, and then you'll be more productive, and then you'll get everything done. So that's my best advice.
That's great. Baiju Solanki, who I'm sure you probably both know, taught me an acronym that has been so powerful for me, and I've shared it on, and it's really impacted elsewhere. And that is NATO. So being not attached to the outcome. And so now we can add the UN to NATO, and I think that's equally as powerful. Unplug, unfriend, unsubscribe, and you know, I've unsubscribed from something this morning, and you feel really guilty. You think, no, just clear. You know, get rid of the noise if you're not engaging with it anyway. John Boyce has said, "Great advice, thanks, Mindy. My motto is let it be easy." And no one ever said that about the UN and NATO before, so we've been able to reframe that. So look, this is a Connected Leadership podcast. We've talked a lot about thought and thoughtful leadership. I now want to finish by tying it back in to this idea of the impact of professional relationships. So how do relationships help you become a better thought leader, and vice versa? How does your thought leadership help grow and develop and nurture your relationships? So, Mindy, let me come to you first with that. How do your relationships help you become a better thought leader?
So your relationships really are the only way in which you can develop your thought leadership. So people who you're connected to already, people who you connect with, feel that empathy, sympathy, like-mindedness, and new people. So to not to be too busy to widen your circle, to put yourself into new spaces, to, welcome introductions. I've got a very open approach to my networking, as you know, Andy, and, it doesn't always result in brilliant relationships, but sometimes it does. So to really reinforce what you've got and to welcome new ones. And it's through conversations, be they like this. I prefer talking. Some people prefer, doing lots of typing on blogs and threads. That's not me. But to engage in those conversations and to be willing to share and to be willing to ask and be vulnerable, like we've been talking about, because we don't know it all. And when we think we do, we're doomed. That's what I think.
Thank you. And Dan, you talked about locking horns, and clearly that helps develop your thought leadership, and that comes from your strong relationships. But what about the other way around? How does thought leadership help develop those relationships further?
I mean, it's incredible when you start putting ideas into the marketplace. The people it attracts like a magnet it constantly blows my mind. I've had billionaires reach out to me and say, "I read your book, and can we get in touch?" I've had that happen twice. I've had professional athletes. I've had high-ranking people in the military who have said, "I'd love to have a conversation with you about some of the things that you've talked about," and it's just this incredible nature of the fact that an idea now has the ability to go whizzing around the world, picking up steam, finding people, connecting with people. Mindy says this in her talks all the time. It's your ambassador, it's your connector, it's your diplomat. It's your content is out there, meeting people, connecting with people, and in many cases, just bringing untold opportunities back to you. I can think of prime examples where my content has brought me investment. It's brought me great customers. It's brought joint venture partnerships. It's brought great friends. I actually, through a roundabout way, I guess I'm married to the person that I'm married to as a result of some of the stuff that I've put out there, and thought leadership, and who that's connected with me, who's connected to my now wife. So if you trace it all back, a lot can be said for where those relationships come from.
And Mindy,
can I just add? A lot of people may not know this, but when I first came out with 24 Karat Bold, I handed Daniel a copy, and we didn't know each other that well. We kind of knew each other, and it created a professional relationship that went on for 5 years.
Yeah.
And I'll always be grateful. That it was a bit scary approaching you, to be honest, Daniel. It was just this big personality and presence. But I just thought we can connect. And I think if I hadn't had that book and everything I put into it, I would not have had the confidence to have that discussion with you and say, come on, can we collaborate?
That's a very good point. It's something we haven't touched on. When you've got that published work, it gives you that credibility, which gives you that confidence. You're the same person, but it's almost like a tangible proof that you're that person that makes a big difference. We touched on this at the beginning of our live stream, not on the podcast. So for the benefit of the listeners to the podcast and anyone who's joined the live stream a little bit later, Mindy, you're hosting a thought leadership conference online on Tuesday. So that's tomorrow if you're listening to the podcast on the day it comes out on Monday. And I happen to be the MC for the event, but do you want to just give us another quick one or two liner on the conference and where people can find it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I hope if people Google Above and Beyond 2021, they'll find it. If Kinga hasn't found the link,
she has. It's in the comments on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Great, super. It's a chance to really dedicate some time. It's going on the whole day. People will hop in and hop out. In fact, that's the platform. Hop in, and we hope they don't hop out. But there's things going on. We're recording all of the talks, so everybody who registers will get all the videos. So it's a chance to focus on your own thought leadership and thoughtful leadership. It's very rare that you have a whole day to, reflect, to listen, to learn. The networking opportunities are phenomenal. We've had such great response that it gave me confidence to run it online again. So last year we wanted to have it anyway. Never mind, that was last year. What we're doing on Tuesday is another fantastic jam-packed day full of nuggets, insights, and I can't promise what it will result in for any individual, but if they come along and are open to some of the things we've been talking about today, it could really create some magic. Thank you for allowing me to talk about it.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. In case anyone's listening to this after publication and after the conference, it's Tuesday the 30th of November, is that right, off the top of my head? So if people are listening to this afterwards and want to get the content, can they register in hindsight?
Yes, we will make sure there's a link, and we'll be planning next year's. So
Fantastic.
which hopefully will be a hybrid.
Great. Well, if you're on the live stream, don't run away, because we have a second shorter interview where we're going to talk about professional relationships with Daniel and Mindy. If you're listening on the podcast, that will come out on Thursday, so please listen out for that. But for the moment, Daniel and Mindy, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Great. Okay, so quick stretch, and then we'll crack on before anyone leaves the live stream. Brian Chernett had to go, and Rob Moores had to go, but they said they really enjoyed it. We've still got a number of people watching. John Boys said, as an RAF veteran, UN and NATO will definitely stick. So what we need now is a meaning for the acronym RAF.
RAF.
And please keep it clean. But John, you can pop that in the notes in the comments before we finish the live stream. Okay, so are you both ready to go? Happy to rock and roll with the next one? I'm going to take a quick sip of water, which makes for great viewing. There you go. I'm sure that was a magical moment for many of you. Mm-hmm. So for the benefit of those of you who haven't listened before or watched this before, our second interview, it's the same questions every week unless we go off on an interesting tangent, and we're focusing in on the first two questions on the impact of professional relationships, for good and otherwise, on people's careers, and then we ask for some resources to inspire you to finish off with. So we started our first episode with Mindy. So Dan, I'm going to start with you this time. Oh, Kinga said I did that very gracefully, so I might have another sip before the end. Just watch out. We'll start with you, Dan, this time. So can you talk a little bit about how professional relationships have had a positive impact on your career to date?
I think I owe almost everything to professional relationships. I arrived in the UK in 2006 with a suitcase and a credit card and knew absolutely nobody in the UK. And a friend in Australia suggested that I connect with Thomas and Penny Power. And they had a database of over 100,000 people. I put together a dinner party in 2006 where they invited some of their friends and connections. I hosted the dinner party. As a result of that, and as a result of their support, I launched a company. We had about 1,000 bookings in our first week as a result of the connections that I'd made through them. We went on to do, I think, around £2 million worth of business in the very first year, from setting foot in the country and knowing nobody to doing £2 million worth of business in year one with almost no investment at all, credit card level investment. Um, I had another introduction, which was Tom Ball, who said, Daniel, you should join Adam Street Members Club. You should meet this banker who can be your banker. And you should also meet this guy called Ollie Barrett, who's really well connected. Ollie Barrett ended up introducing me to my wife. I ended up meeting everyone else through Adam Street Members Club. I still bank with the same banker today. And literally, all of these things came from professional contacts and connections. So I try to find an area of my life that's not been massively influenced and enhanced through professional connections.
Well, you've mentioned some names there, all of which are very familiar to me, good friends of mine. Tom is just a force of nature, as is Ollie. I mean, Ollie is a standalone, or both are actually. But I want to focus on Thomas and Penny for a second because I mentioned on the live stream intro, not on the podcast intro, but the three of us were all part of that platform that Thomas and Penny set up, Academy, which was one of the earliest social networking sites. And what they did so well was create community. And they created mutual support, and there are still people, and I count you two among them, but there are still people who play a huge role in my professional life and in my personal life, that came through that community, and some of my best friends, some of my closest friends, came through Academy. So yes, I think once you get into that type of community where everyone helps each other without looking to see what's in it for them, that's the key. It's not this guy's come over from Australia, what can we get from him? It's Thomas and Penny have asked us to help him, so we will. And it's that spirit that makes a difference. Mindy, how about
Yeah.
for you?
So the funny thing is, Andy, you and I met because we were both in charge of official networks who shall remain nameless, and
Yes,
you know,
we did.
breakfast meetings, business cards.
BRE and BNI, let's put it out there.
Oh, yeah, all right, all right. I won't say who was who, but
Well, I hope people know.
we had numerous conversations about the fact that yes, you're a member, but that doesn't mean anything. And yes, you attend a breakfast meeting, but if you don't do the one-to-ones, if you don't really get to know people, then it's just paper is being passed around. And and I was training people in this, but eventually I realized that I prefer to form organic networks for myself and not just plug into something and refer because I'm expected to. And that for me, that was really important. So you mentioned Thomas and Penny. And I've stayed in touch with both of them. We've published Penny's book, we've published Thomas' book. We've got a long-standing relationship. And so last year, I was just chatting with Penny about something, and she said she was starting up a new community. I said, oh, tell me more. And when she told me, and it's called the Business is Personal 100, I said, I want to be part of that. And she said, oh, I never thought of you. And so I've been part of that new community for over a year. I've invited others who've joined, and I really believe that if you're coming from that place and it's coming from the heart, then you will find the right people. You'll attract them. And the idea is business is personal, and I think we'd all agree. And that happens to be her book. Everything is based on that. So you cannot separate business from personal or professional relationships, in my opinion.
We talked in the Monday podcast about authenticity. We touched on vulnerability. Penny's book, I think, is a sparkling example of both. An excellent and really engaging read, and she really opens up to the experiences they went through there in a very powerful way. And in Penny's case, and maybe I should get her on to talk about this. In Penny's case, they had a lot of negative stuff happen as a result of some of the relationships they built within the academy. And that leads me on to the second question, which is, where have relationships gone wrong for you? And more importantly, what did you learn from it? So, Mindy, if I can come back to you on that first.
Oh, sure. I'm going to go roll the clock back to when I was 22 years old, and I had just taken on the sales territory for a tech company I worked for. I was so excited. I got up really early, flew up to Canada, and I drove over to meet the person who was in charge of this transition. And they were a partner. They weren't, employed by the company. And I showed up, all guns blazing, on the white horse. And, I'm going to save the day, because the previous person hadn't done a great job performance-wise with the territory. Remember, I was 22. And I went charging in there like a bull in a china shop. And I said, right, I'm expected to pick up these files. And this guy says, I don't know where they are. The body language should have given me a clue. And he was very obstructive for a long time. And I think because I got up early, because I was 22, because I didn't know about this stuff, I was a bit wobbly and emotional, and I think he saw I was about to cry, and eventually he relented. Oh, I think I know where they are, But what I hadn't realized is, obviously, my predecessor hadn't performed the way the company wanted her to, but she had developed the relationship over X number of years. And there I was thinking it was about the files and right, let's fix this. I hope I'm better now. I think I'm better now. It's never just about the task. And I think that it was such an embarrassing moment, and it was scary as well. Imagine if I hadn't got the result that day. So I think I've learned that lesson.
I think there's that point that you can take one person's perspective and think you know the whole story. Whereas what comes across for me there is the company may have told you this person had underperformed, but the people she had to deal with may have felt differently because she'd built the positive relationships with them. So you can't transfer one person's perspective to another's experience, and it's understanding the two. Dan, how about for you? Where's it gone wrong?
I have only had a few relationships that have gone seriously wrong, and I've reflected on them. And essentially, it comes down to values, timeframes, and outcomes. That there's a mismatch in our values, a mismatch in our timeframes, or a mismatch in our outcomes that we have in mind. So I'll give you some values. One relationship that fell apart. The warning sign, the clue was when I heard him in the early days talking about customers as turkeys and bubbas, and there was a total disrespect of the people who were paying the bills, and that to me is just a clash in values. I'm not gonna resonate with that. Another example was the first time I handed this particular gentleman a copy of my book, and he immediately used it as a coaster for his coffee, and he put the coffee straight on top of the book as a coaster, and it raised an immediate red flag. This is someone who doesn't value what I do, what I work, or any of those sorts of things. There's a disrespect, and it wasn't long before that relationship came undone. But there was very clear values misalignment. There was one relationship that fell apart because of timeframes and outcomes. I wanted to build a successful performance business. My outcome that I had in mind was building something that would grow big and that would scale and that would be very valuable, and that we needed to reinvest in it. And we had to take the profits we were making and put it back into the business. And his outcome was to take as many holidays as possible and to have a lifestyle business and fun, freedom, and flexibility. And his whole thing was like pull as much cash out of the business as possible. So the two of us were looking at each other as though we were both mad. I'm looking at him going, why would we be pulling money out and taking holidays when things are going so well? He's saying, why would we be not pulling money out and taking holidays when things are going so well? So there was a misalignment in outcomes. But basically, the reflection for me is a misalignment in values, timeframes, or outcomes is always the bedrock of relationships that have fallen out.
And it's all about communication, isn't it? Understanding up front what you
Don't
both
use my book
expect.
as a coaster.
Is it at least a gloss cover, I hope?
Well, it didn't suggest he was rushing to read it. I had a similar, not as bad, but a similar experience very recently. So I know exactly how you feel. Mindy, we always finish with some books, some podcasts that people recommend, TED Talks. You've obviously both got publishing houses, so I'm asking you not to promote all the publishers, all the authors on your list for the moment, although Mindy, feel welcome. But what books for you personally have stood out, either recently or really made a big impact over the course of your career? Books, podcasts, talks, whatever it might be.
Yeah. So anything by Tony Robbins. I was lucky enough to be exposed to Tony when I was in my 20s, and it was his books, but also his tapes. It wasn't podcast back then, it was cassette tapes, yes, I'm old. And went through all the training. I'm one of their senior leaders, and I feel really blessed and honored to be part of that community. So if people have not yet experienced Tony in any form, there's a lot of online now, to check him out. The one book that stands out, and again, I wish I had published it, but it's by the late, great Stephen Covey, and it's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it was at Stephen's event where Daniel and I spoke, if I'm not mistaken, and put together some business. And, we saw him for one of the last times that he spoke in person. But those 7 habits, which are all about integrity, all about values, all about, being a thoughtful leader. He didn't use that phrase. That really spoke to me then and speaks to me now. So, and TED Talks, they're all great. And if people watch mine, please give it a thumbs up because we're aiming for that million. But we're just so blessed to have all these channels out there. So I'm not going to recommend any more.
What's the title of your TED Talk, Mindy?
Sometimes you need to change yourself to be yourself.
There you go. Easy to find now. Dan, how about for you?
I'm going to go off the rails here. I'm going to say that the book that changes your life the most is not one you read, it's one that you write. And that if you want to really, truly change your life through a book, write one because it gets you to organize your thinking. It gives you a platform. It gives you a way of communicating with people. The process of writing a book forces you to deep dive into your thinking and back it up. And here's a bit of a challenge, and the challenge is this: if you've got time to listen to podcasts, record a podcast. If you've got time to read a book, write a book. If you've got time to be reading blogs, write a blog. We advance through what we create, not what we consume. So stop reading my books. Go and write your own. I know it's a bit of a controversial way of answering that question, but I think we're living in a world of hyper-consumption. Everyone's consuming. And the real value I find is the value, the learnings that I get from the creation of something. In the process of creation, I'm learning and I'm producing something of value. So I'm just going to throw it out there as a challenge to anyone listening. Go and write a book.
There you go. Now, having spent our Monday podcast talking about thought leadership, that seems like the perfect note on which to end this episode. The time has absolutely flown past over the course of our 2 conversations. For everyone who's joined us on our live stream, and I can see that quite a few have stuck with it right the way through for a marathon session on a Friday lunchtime, thank you very much for doing so. I hope that means you found it valuable. I'm sure you did, because I found it fascinating. Daniel, Mindy, thank you very much for joining me on the Connected Leadership podcast.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
And thank you as well for joining us. It's been great to have you with us all the way through, and I really appreciate all of your comments. If you've joined and you're watching this after it's gone out live, please feel free to add comments and add to the discussion. Daniel and Mindy are both tagged, and hopefully they'll pick those up as well, and I'll keep my eye open for them as well and join you. And if you've enjoyed this, keep your eye open for further live streams coming. As I said at the very beginning, we're taking a pause from the podcast until February in terms of releasing the episodes, but I'm going to need to be playing a bit of catch up, so I'm still going to be interviewing people, and quite a number of those, if the tech allows, will be live streamed. So come and join us for those, and thank you for joining me today on the Connected Leadership Podcast. Have a great weekend.